Hello, hello. This is Captain Terra Phoenix, and I want to welcome everyone to the very first episode of my new series, The Naval Yard. In this series, we're going to be taking a look at both individual ships and lines of ships and seeing their strengths, their weaknesses, and looking at whether they might be something that a new player would want to get started on, or an experienced player that has been playing something else might want to take a look at. So, as everyone knows, the British cruisers have just come out, and so everyone's playing them. Naturally, we're going to be doing a review of the German battleship Konig Albert. So I don't get the ships as an early release like the major YouTubers do, so I'm still grinding up the line. I've gotten up to the Leander, and once I finish that ship, I'm going to go ahead and release that video. But for now, what I'd like to cover is this ship. This is the Konig Albert, and it is a very nice little battleship. There's a couple things about it that make it pretty unique. The first thing is its survivability. Now, it has a lot of hit points and a very good armor and torpedo protection rating for its tier. One thing I want to show you about the armor is it is not the American style. It is the older style of armor, so it is armored all the way bow to stern. This Citadel armor here, the 350 millimeters of armor, is absurd. Just to give you an idea for comparison, here's the Tirpitz. This is a ship that everyone knows is incredibly overpowered when it comes to pointing the bow in and being impossible to Citadel. She has 315 millimeters of belt armor and a 32 millimeter bow, which is enough to prevent overpenetration for her tier. The Konig Albert, at tier 3, has 350 millimeters of belt armor, and her bow armor is 120 millimeters thick, 180 when you get further back to the side here. The only weakness she has in the bow armor above the waterline is right here, this very narrow strip at the top. So unless you get shot here, which is pretty hard to do at close range, you are pretty much invulnerable to most fire that you're going to see at your tier. About the only thing that you're ever scared of in this ship is the Imperator Nikolai, and, well, I think everyone can admit that that ship is incredibly overpowered. Now, another thing you want to note about this ship's armor profile is it does have a major weakness on the rear. A lot of battleships, if you run into overwhelming fire, you'll turn around and start firing from the back. That's actually a really bad idea in this ship because your rear armor is only 16 millimeters. It's pretty much the reverse of the front. Instead of most of the armor being very strong with only a small weakness there, you've got mostly weakness with only a little bit of strong belt armor. So shots are going to go straight through this. And if they do, they've got a flat shot right into your citadel. So if you show the rear of this ship, you're not going to last long against a battleship. Cruisers, you're probably going to be all right, but not a battleship. The other thing I'd like to point out about this ship that makes it really strong is its primary armament. It's got some fairly powerful 305 millimeter guns and a really powerful secondary armament. Just for comparison, you get 14 150 millimeter guns and 12 88 millimeter guns in two different types of mounts. This is like having your own St. Louis strapped to the side of the ship. It is incredibly potent. So, like any of the other German battleships, you can train your commander up as a secondary specialist and get the most out of these guns, because 5 kilometers roughly on your secondary range with the commander's skill. Getting close, no destroyer is going to survive that. And that's going to be your main opponent in these battles, is torpedoes. So you want to do as much damage to those pesky destroyers as you can. Now, there is a bit of a lie on the main battery, though. It says it is 5 double turrets. It isn't really. These midships turrets here very rarely can both fire in the same direction because of their peculiar placement here. Let me go ahead and get rid of the armor layout so we can get a clearer look. Now, when you see here, you've got these two turrets are fairly reliable. Your standard rear-mounted turrets, they spin as you'd expect them to, as does the single front turret. These ones, they're not super firing. They're side by side. So, from bow on, from any angling like this turret is blocked by the other turret. It can't actually fire till you're about here, which is almost completely broadside on, which would be a very bad idea. The same is true of your other turret, but for slightly different reasons. Because it's mounted all the way on this side of the ship, if you're firing forward to the port side, it's blocked by the superstructure here. Until you get, again, almost a complete broadside angle. About here is when it's able to start firing. And firing from about here, all the way throughout the rear arc, it's blocked by the other turret and then the superstructure. So these, you're really only going to get one of them unless you're completely broadside on. And if you do that, you're probably only going to get to fire them once because you're going to explode. Alrighty, as for your other stats here, for your anti-air defense, well, you have it. You're a Tier 3 battleship, so you're not going to see many carriers in the first place. But if you do see planes coming for you, start turning immediately. That's the only real defense that you have. This ship cannot shoot down planes. You might be able to knock out a Japanese fighter or two, but you are not taking down the American ones. And you are going to take hits if you rely on your anti-aircraft to take them down. The 488 mils, they only shoot out to 3.6 kilometers. By that point, the planes are dropping their cargo anyway. You're gonna take hits. Just don't worry about it. Pretend that you don't have any AA at all, and just start turning. Stick with the cruiser and you'll be good. Now, for maneuverability, this ship is pretty good. It's got the highest max speed of all of the Tier 3 battleships at 21 knots. It has a fairly large turning circle of 600 meters, which is significantly larger than the South Carolina. That one's got a 480, and it's a little bit bigger than the Japanese and German turning circle radiuses. However, its rudder shift time is faster than all of them except for the Nassau. And the Nassau's is only 1 second faster. So you're able to adjust your course a lot quicker, even if it does take a little bit wider to make that turn. Though you can, with a little bit of practice, turn that to your advantage. Whenever a destroyer is making a close-range torpedo drop on you, you're able to shift and adjust very quickly. And they are going to start shooting their torpedoes at your projected course and inside of your projected course, so that they can account for if you're not paying any attention at all, or if you start to adjust. The combination of your speed, rudder shift time, and the large turning circle radius means that this ship can drift. If you time it right, you will completely throw off the destroyer's aim by sliding around their torpedoes. With this ship, always turn into the torpedoes if they catch you off guard. It gives you less time to get on the course, but you can take advantage of the drifting. That has saved my bacon so many times in close-range fights with destroyers, because they see a battleship and they expect you to turn away, because it generally gives you more time to dodge the torpedoes. I don't agree with that tactic if you're caught off guard, though, because it ends up making you hit more torpedoes. Primarily because of the drifting. You're going to swing your ship to the side, as the torpedoes are coming in, let's say we've got a torpedo coming in this way. You start turning away, and you are going to miss the lead torpedo. But the torpedoes coming in from behind are now going to be bracketing you. If you are not perfect timing this with your rudder shift, those torpedoes running parallel, you are going to continue turning as your rudder resets to neutral, and you're most likely going to take one or two of those torpedoes on the side. If you're coming towards a torpedo, they don't run parallel with you as long. So if you aim it right, that torpedo coming in, you're still going to miss the lead torpedoes because you're turning away and they're not hitting. Those trailing torpedoes, on the other hand, if you time it right, are not going to spend as long beside your ship. So all you have to do is thread the needle. And if your rudder keeps turning, by the time you swing that extra distance, those torpedoes are already past you, which gives you a lot of an advantage because you're also, at that point, going to be within your secondary battery range, and that destroyer is going to melt, and he won't be able to get away because you'll be too close for him to stealth back up. Now, the last aspect of this ship is her concealment. Her concealment's not bad. It's 11.2 kilometers. It's fairly large, and it is larger than your firing range, which can be a problem. You've got a 10.8 kilometer firing range and an 11.2 kilometer detectability, so you know that when you can fire at something, they can see you. It's not that big of a deal, though, in this ship, because, again, with her armor, she can take those hits. The only things that you have to be concerned about in her are plunging fire. Because, again, you got this really strong belt armor and side armor. Your top armor, not so much. So with this one, you want to make sure that you are up close. You should pretty much always be detected in this ship because you should be the up-close brawler. You should be taking the hits for your team and just deleting all the cruisers that you see with these guns. That's enough of her stats. Let's take a look at how she plays. As you can see from the lineup, this is a Tier 4 match. It's not the best game I've ever played in this ship, nor is it the worst. It's a good, average game to give you a reasonable expectation for how well you can do in this ship. Since this is a battleship and they are a little slow to get into the action, I've jumped ahead to the first time that I've been spotted. Take a look at what we can do here. The first thing I'd like you to take note of is, look where I am on the map. I'm not in the back like you see a lot of battleships. I'm right up here in the front with all of my cruisers. Now you can see how much damage this ship can do to enemy cruisers. I know that's a British one, they're a little bit weak to armor piercing, but look at all that damage. That was from one salvo. She can dish out a lot of punishment with those main battery shells. Doesn't take much to bring a cruiser down. Now, as this other cruiser comes around the headland, take a look at that number 2 turret. I had mentioned that you have a hard time getting those middle guns to fire when you're at the side. Look at how far broadside I am, and yet that number 2 turret still didn't fire. Keep an eye on my reticle. When it turns green, it shows you how far I have to turn for it to finally be able to fire. And right there, that's how far broadside you have to be. So you're better off with these middle turrets, just only go with the one that's on the same side of the ship that you're firing from, and don't worry about the other one. It will just get you killed, showing that much of a broadside, especially if you're fighting a battleship like this one coming around the corner soon. Another thing to note about the Konig Albert is that you don't have the rapid firing guns that a lot of the German battleships get. They're not a 25-second reload, they're the full 30-second reload of most ships. So you do want to wait for your shot. You saw me looking, waiting for that beautiful shot, and that was full health to dead with one salvo. So here, I spent a little bit of time charging in, angling my armor, and not doing a whole lot. So I'm going to jump ahead to right after I clear the headland up there, because there's a couple more things I'd like to show you in this area. So, right here, we're starting to come around the island, and we've got this pesky little Karlsruhe that we can't seem to kill. Here's one of the things I want to show you that can be a problem with this ship. As you can see, I just hit her several times, but they were all over penetrations. The ship does have very powerful guns, so they do tend to go straight through those lightly armored cruisers. And then that last shot you saw bracketed the ship with standard battleship accuracy, and she's gonna get away. Now you can see the strength of this ship's armor right here. I'm broadside on, made a poor decision. Getting away with it, though, because she has such amazing armor. They're hitting me. These are not missing. But over the course of this entire time, some ships with powerful armor piercing, we've got a Danae up there, are not able to get through that thick armor. I think after taking a dozen hits, I only lost about 700 health. So that's really, really strong. So here we're going to get to see the turning circle issue in a little bit more detail. That 600-meter turning circle is very wide for this tier. You'll notice it if you've played any of the other battleships. We're coming around trying to get into the smoke, and I'm at full rudder, but it's just taking a while to turn, especially at full speed. So we're going to come around, and we're going to just kind of help this Kaladin get back into his smoke screen, because he seems to have just overshot it. So we're going to be a good pal, a good teammate, just give him a little nudge back into that smoke screen. Yeah, this was completely deliberate and not me running into a allied ship because I wasn't paying any attention to where I was going. Yeah, that was my bad. We want to make sure that we're watching where we're going when we're making these turns in a battleship, because you have to plan ahead and it's hard to get out. Now, we do have this Wyoming coming around here that's presenting us a very nice shot, so we're going to fire. One thing that you're going to notice in this ship is that Tier 4s aren't a problem. You're only a Tier 3, but you're going to forget, because you're basically the same ship as the Kaiser, which is a Tier 4, and you're able to take on those Tier 4 ships without any problem. You saw I got some very nice hits into that Wyoming, and we're going to try and get a little closer to finish her off if we can. She's seen torpedoes and she's turning. Now, one of those torpedoes does look like it's going to hit, so we're going to hold our fire, wait for her to take damage, and then finish her off when she comes out of... Or she could get magazine citadeled and explode. Well, that's a little bit of damage we're not going to get to do, but no worries, we got a few cruisers up ahead to take our frustrations out on. So, we've got a couple of choices here. We've got both the Svetlana, which is bow on to us, and the Danae, which is presenting a beautiful broadside. Now, this is where I actually make a mistake, because remember, these guns are very powerful. So I hit the broadside of the Danae and over penetrations. Barely do any damage at all. Whereas if that had been a Citadel, it would have detonated her. Now, we've got the Svetlana was bow on. If I had shot at her, it would have probably gone straight through the bow and finished her off and gotten me that kill. As is, the Danae is going to get finished off by one of our other ships here, so we're going to go ahead and try and finish off this Svetlana that's been hanging on by just a couple of hit points. Straight through the front. And that was an over-penetration too, even though it went right through the bow armor and most of the ship. That just shows you the power of these guns. Gonna dodge these torpedoes that our cruiser decided that he wanted to block for me. Thank you, cruiser. You're a team player, keeping those torpedoes from hitting your battleship. I'm sure that's exactly what your plan was. Nah, kid. Those were dropped right on top of him by the Danae. A very nice drop, and he didn't really have much of a chance of avoiding them. Good kill to the enemy Danae. So, we've been detected by aircraft. This is the first time the enemy carrier has launched an attack on us. It seems he's finally thought of us as being a threat. Took us a while to prove ourselves, but it feels good to get some attention. Now, here's where that AA I mentioned, you just don't want to rely on it. AA is blazing away at these bombers. They're American bombers. All of them get their bombs off. And I do manage to shoot one down, but it's not until they're well on their way out, and it's really not worth anything when it gets taken out after it's dropped its payload. You want to make sure that you're being evasive and not getting hit in the first place. We've got our second showdown with an enemy battleship. We've got good hits on him, and most of his damage was blocked by our armor. And we're only reasonably angled, we're not completely bow on. You can see how strong and how effective that armor is. It's very comfortable being in this ship because you can trust your armor. Coming around, taking another shot at him, and right as we start swinging our rudder around, you can see that there are some torpedo bombers, and we're the only ship in the area. They're probably coming at us. Here's where that rudder shift I talked about comes into play. As soon as I saw those bombers, I started turning my rudder towards them, and I'm actually navigating on the mini-map here, keeping my eye on them so I can go bow in towards them. I was able to shift around very, very quickly from full rudder one direction to full rudder the other and sneak in between these torpedoes. And when you come bow onto a torpedo, you see how little time those torpedoes are next to me. Even though I'm hard rudder and the ship is still swinging, by the time that would be a problem, the torpedoes are already past me. Then I can turn around and come back after the ship I was fighting. Or I would if he hadn't been sunk by my teammates while I was dodging those torpedoes. That's actually something you want to be very careful of. That was a very well executed torpedo strike by the enemy carrier because it forced me to turn completely broadside to a Tier 4 battleship. It's a good thing my teammates took him out because that could have hurt a lot. Your armor is strong, but you don't want to push it. If you're broadside on to an enemy battleship, they will still punish you. We get a couple more hits on this Nassau here. It's the first time I've been able to engage a battleship that's the same tier as me. Honestly, it's the first time I've been able to face any Tier 3 ship. For the most part, with the exception of those two Caledons at the beginning, all of the cruisers and battleships we've been fighting were Tier 4, and you didn't even really notice it because of how nice this ship is. We had the Karlsruhe, we had the Svetlana, we had a couple of Kaisers. Even the carrier is a Tier 4. Sadly, he gets taken out by one of our allies before we can get too much damage on him, but as a consolation prize, the enemy carrier has just popped off, and there's nothing more satisfying than taking down a carrier that's been trying to sink you with torpedoes for the last several minutes. So we're going to go ahead and try and swing our ship around. He's actually, for some reason, turning south to present us an even nicer broadside, so we're going to bring all of our turrets to bear on him and try to take him down as quickly as possible. Personally, I like to use armor piercing on carriers to try and citadel them and take them out in one or two shots. High explosive tends to work better for consistent damage, but as you can see, if you can get those penetrations rather than overpens, armor piercing will take them down really fast. Now he's coming in for one more shot with torpedoes. These are also pretty well dropped, but it looks like they're an auto drop rather than a manual drop. You can tell by how far back they drop and how wide of a spread it is. If this had been a manual drop, he might have been able to hit me with one or two, but as is, it's pretty easy to anticipate the direction they're coming from and slide right in between. Again, you want to anticipate and dodge rather than relying on your anti-aircraft, because I didn't even get one of those bombers. And at this point, this match is pretty much over. We're getting a little bit more damage on that carrier, trying to take him out, but unfortunately we're not going to get the kill. Some of our teammates are going to get him just before we can reload. And that is the end of the match. So that's not bad. We got just under 65,000 damage done in a ship that only has 41,000 health. And with a battleship, that's how you know that you're doing well. You want to do at least as much damage as you have health. The old fire for effect medal from World of Tanks. She also proved her durability because at the end of the match, we'd only taken 5,000 damage, and that wasn't because we were hanging at the back. We were stuck in with the cruisers for pretty much the entire match. Armor was deflecting all of our shots, and our maneuverability was letting us dodge most of the aircraft coming in. You'll find that it's very easy to stay alive in this ship so long as you watch where the destroyers are, get in close, and keep your armor angled. She's a very comfortable ship. So, that's the Konig Albert. And what's the final verdict? Well, she's a very good ship. Very forgiving, fairly easy to learn. She's got good armor, good guns, and you'll be able to do a lot with her. I'd say that if you like battleships or you're looking for a battleship that you'd like to learn the playstyle without having too much difficulty, I would definitely recommend picking up the Konig Albert. She's a great ship and will serve you well. Well, that's all the time we have for today. So until next time, this is Captain Terra Phoenix signing off.